Welcome to this week's episode of Soul School. We are back again. Kevin and I are here to do another short episode, and Kevin's going to lead us through this one on a topic around relationships. I don't really know exactly what we're doing, but hey, Kevin, how are you?
Good, good. Yeah, this is a little something that came to me one day while I was walking in the woods, uh, as I tend to do, and it really, yeah, it's all around relationships. And first of all, how everything in life is a relationship to ourselves, a relationship to the others in our life, relationship to circumstances, and like reality itself, right? And, but I want to talk about relationships with ourselves and others. And here's the idea. The idea is around intimacy and how intimacy is the compound interest of consistent, courageous connection. So I'll say it again. Intimacy is the compound interest of consistent, courageous connection.
So I just want
And
to interrupt and say that this is what you hit me up with right before we hopped on. And I was like, wait, I'm just
what?
going to stop you there. Let you say that to me live because that's awesome. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what is that? I mean, I know what that means a little to myself, but what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So let's unpack it a little bit
Mhm.
because, um, first of all, nobody ever hit the intimacy Powerball. As much as we would like to, we want it all in one big lump sum, so to speak, where it's just like instantaneous. But the truth of any kind of real intimacy is it is like these small deposits over time that just build and build and build. And the secret to the whole thing is hidden in the word itself, intimacy. Into me, see. It all comes down to your willingness to not only see, let's start with ourselves, like really look inside of ourselves, like the deep willingness to see ourselves, to know ourselves to our very core, even those things that we have been taught not to love about ourselves. Um, because you can't give others what you don't have yourself. So
Mhm.
out of your own brokenness, you'll bring that brokenness into your other relationships. So the first thing is, in order to have true courageous intimacy with others, you have to have it with yourself first,
Mhm.
right? So let's just go through the main parts. Intimacy is the compound interest of consistent, courageous connection. So it has to be consistent. And the more important part of it, though, is that it has to be courageous. You have to go beneath the surface. You can't just have surface level, deposits. You can't have surface level seeing and knowing. You actually have to be seen and known. Into me, see. I mean, really, isn't that everything that we're craving from our closest relationships? I mean, we really want to be seen and known, and so much of our um, the sense of lack in our relationships is that where it doesn't feel like there's any depth. So, yeah, I was walking in the woods one day, and that whole concept just dropped into me like, as a complete concept, and it hit me at exactly the right time because I was, like everybody else, really most of my struggles and growth opportunities are in relationship with intimacy.
Mm.
So there you
Relationship
have it.
with oneself and others, right?
Yeah.
Um, what's really, I mean, there's so many things that I feel like I could bounce off of from there, but the first thing that's really striking me is being seen.
Mhm.
And I feel, and I'm curious what your thought is on it, but the problem with being seen has two issues. One is on an egoic level, you might see all of my humanness, and my humanness meaning sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. I'm not the greatest. I may have jealousy or I may act out of accordance or anger or whatever, right? Be over approval or whatever it is, right? And there's some lack of desire to show people the quote negative qualities, right? We
Yeah.
want to just be seen for our our higher functioning self,
Yeah.
and then, and because we don't wanna be judged, we don't wanna be judged, right? And then the second part is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on both, but to be seen is to know how to allow people into the essence of myself, right? The sort of non-egoic soul self, which is the stillness of me, which takes a lot of comfort in the discomfort to do that, because it's almost, in my mind, like going through this barrier of egoic self to allow that self to just present.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So yeah, being seen and being known. I mean, so much of there's so much of our energy is spent basically protecting these narratives that we have about ourselves, and stories that
Mhm.
we have about ourselves. And I like to go all the way back to when we were little kids, even before we learned language. And you can just watch little kids. I mean, our neighbors have little kids, and they are not self-conscious. They're
Right.
simply being themselves. And like somewhere along the way, early on, we learned that it's not okay to be ourselves. I mean, if you think about it, that's actually what shame is. Brene Brown talks a lot about this and how guilt is you did something wrong. Shame is there's something wrong with you.
That's right.
And right, and so much of the pain and the hiding in our relationships, it really is that it's I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me, and if I show people who I really am, then they won't accept me. Um,
Yeah, and Kevin, you make like this, right? Because when kids are little and they're angry, we tell them to stop. When they're
yeah,
showing genuine, like, honest emotion, we want to regulate them back to some kind of central place. Even if they're overly giggly in the wrong moment, we don't like that, right? So there's this organization around base emotions and experiences, forgetting showing their essence, right? That
yeah,
second sort of part of them, but just these very human, kids are honest. They're like, when they're mad,
yeah,
and they don't feel guilty. And that's something we learn.
yeah, yeah. And we just learn early on to hide, like to hide ourselves, to sort of put on these costumes for the sake of survival and for the sake of acceptance, within these social
Mhm.
settings. If you want to take this all the way back to our founding myths as people, like what we're talking about is the Garden of Eden, you know, where they were ashamed of themselves and they hid themselves, right? So in the story of the Garden of Eden, they eat the apple and God comes around and they're hiding and they say, "Look, we hid from you because we're naked." And God's like, "Who told you you're naked? Who told you that you're naked?" And so we learn like this, we really learn this shame in hiding ourselves really as a way of being accepted. But that's the very thing that keeps us separate from each other, and separate
Mm.
from ourselves. And this is why it takes a lot of courage. It's consistent, courageous connection because that level of connection with ourselves, it, I mean, it's a risk because you don't know how people are going to respond. You don't know if they're going to be okay with the way you are, right? It may not meet uh, their their idea of who they think you should be. In the same way, right? We have ideas around who we think other people should be, and ultimately, really, that's where our relationship level is. Is I have an idea of myself, and that idea of myself has a relationship with my idea of you, right?
Right.
Until we're actually able to strip away the stories and the ideas and really see each other.
That's
Like you
right.
said,
And
it's the essence of the person.
and I think what I'm hearing you say is your relationship with yourself, right, is first, because who's judging who mostly, right? I mean, we like to blame other people, but in reality, um it's hard to be seen because we are trying to hide from ourselves. So, can
Yeah,
you even sit with your own personality without judgment? Because
yeah,
if you can't accept you, then when somebody comes around and pokes one of those buttons that you're not accepting of yourself, you blame the other person as really problematic in your life.
yeah,
But are they? Because, like, if I were to sit here, Kevin, and say to you all day long, like, "You're just the shittiest father ever. You're awful. Nobody, like, thinks you're good at it. You're awful. You're awful." like, you know that's not true, but I know you well, and I could pick on something that you're a little more insecure about, and it
Mhm.
would create this discomfort, and you'd want me to stop. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. Ultimately, nobody's judging you. Not really. Not in a way that can hurt you. And this is why, when people say nobody can hurt you, they're telling the truth. Because if you were to say those things to me in Mandarin Chinese, which I don't speak, you would just be making noises at me.
Mm.
And my mind would have no way of wrapping it in meaning and going, oh, well, yeah, she's right. Or no, she's wrong. And I need to prove that she's wrong.
Whoa,
You know what I mean?
that's so I haven't heard that before, dude. That's so deep. Right, right. It's like, take away the ability to even understand the language, and the same things are being said, and I can't be offended. That's so clever.
Yeah.
I hadn't
Because
even heard that.
language is just, you're just making meaning, right?
Mhm,
It's a this or it's a that.
mhm.
And yeah, I mean, strip away all the meaning, which I mean, only you are doing it anyway.
Yeah,
So if somebody, like if you said that to me, it only triggers me because somewhere inside of me, like you said, I'm insecure and I believe on some level. And I either
right.
hate that I think it's true, or, I feel threatened. And so I have to push back against it.
And I do think it's important. I always sort of love to throw this caveat, asterisk, asterisk, in this one part of these conversations that I mean, the reality is, right? Like, if somebody comes and brings a knife to my throat or, like, comes in my face and starts screaming at me, massive profanities in a violent kind of way, there is, of course, going to be pain that arises within me. Like, that is not
Mm.
a comfortable or acceptable experience for me. But the meaning is the part that
Yeah.
gets in our way, right? And we think because that person's acting in some way that is a judgment upon me, and then I don't wanna be seen, and then I go back further and further within myself, and we build relationships from these sort of narcissistic positions, really, right?
Mhm.
Because this idea that nothing's actually happening to you, it's just happening around you, it's so hard to take that in, right? Because in a moment when somebody's behaving in a way that's very unpleasant, and truly, like, sometimes it really is a problem, I mean, right? We don't wanna underestimate child abuse or violence or, those kinds of things, um, but it's still weirdly the other person's experience, just it happens to be around you just like a tornado comes through your house in a bad weather day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And two, like it has nothing to do with you when they're upset either.
That's
So,
right.
I mean, that took me a long time to fully get to my bones that no, this is somebody else's stuff. That's their issue. And I don't have to make it my stuff. Like I can
Right,
let,
but this
you know,
spiritual bypassing of saying, "But I feel nothing," is the mistake, right?
yeah,
I still can feel really uncomfortable in the
yeah,
presence of somebody who's super angry or something, right?
yeah,
But it's still not about me.
yeah, exactly. And I would say that that's where a lot of the gold is too. Because one of the best things you can do really is to go out and get good and pissed off and get triggered. Because what it's going to do is it really is going to reveal the stories that you have
Yeah.
inside of you, the things that you really believe about yourself or insecure about, so that you can really investigate them, see if they're true. More than likely, they're not. I mean, you probably shouldn't believe most of your thoughts.
From Kevin, this idea of like building this slow, how did you put it again?
It's the compound interest of consistent, courageous connection.
Compound interest of consistent, courageous connection. So it's doing it consistently and that builds and compounds over time, right? Um, so say somebody is out there and they're like, okay, I hear you, ready to get going at it. Like, is the first step to sort of start to get comfortable with oneself and allow people in more? How would you say to move forward in this in life?
Yeah, I think that there are two ways, two simple ways. One is with yourself, and if you can't if you can't find ways to be open, right? To make yourself seen and known, um, do things for others. Serve others. Do kind. Just be kind. Show up for other people. Ask them, how you can be helpful, or ask them how they're doing. Be genuinely interested in them, right? Because a lot of people do find it difficult. They're like, well, how do I begin accessing my own self? It typically happens in the process of engaging with other people and
Mhm.
showing up. Because when you give kindness, when you give love, when you see others, you actually are being seen at the same time. This
Mhm.
is where giving is receiving at the same time. And then it actually becomes easier to do it for yourself. So,
Yeah. Particularly in moments when people are in distress and perhaps, um, the energy levels get a little harder to be around because that challenges you to connect even deeper within yourself to be in
yeah,
service to them. Yeah.
yeah. And another thing too is really just sitting down and talking with a friend and being really honest. Share something with them that makes you feel uncomfortable. This is the only way. I mean, if you don't want intimacy, that's okay. Don't do these things. Stay small, have small relationships. That's all good. Nothing wrong with that. But if you do want to go deeper, like somebody has to be the first mover. And, so you have to open up and share, your anxieties, where you feel afraid, what you feel like you're struggling with right now. And, most of the time people won't see that as weakness. They'll say, "Oh, wow, like you too? Like I feel this way too." I mean, this is, I've gotten, from our friendship and our conversations, when you are open and you share with me, it makes me want to be open and share more too. Like it just
Mhm.
kind of opens up this gap,
Yeah.
and people just kind of relax a little bit, and they don't feel like they have to have all of their shit together. It's okay to, feel fear, sadness, anxiety, all of these things. And then you can be there for each other.
I love it. More walks in the forest. Deep thoughts with Kevin. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, my pleasure.